Helps when I'm not on mute. Ooh, me. Ooh, me. Wait, why is it not? Oh, come on, you can do this. There you go. Ooh, me. Ooh, me. Ooh, me. Alright, I'm gonna be eating at the same time, so excuse me.
お嬢様、どうか気をお静めください。
No. Wait. Where did I leave this? Hold on. Did I leave this in the middle of a fucking... Hold on. Did I leave this right in the middle of the fucking action? That was awfully dumb of me. Hold on, let me just check it. No, come on, YouTube, what the fuck are you doing? Stop it. Oh, okay. No. Okay, this is just really weirdly kind of plopped me right in the middle of fucking everything here. Okay. Fine.
誰が犯人かはまだわかりませんぞ。それにベアトリーチェ様は親方様の大切な賓客です。
だからなんだってんだ。本人の胸ぐらひねり上げてやれば白状するに決まってるぜ。目を見ればわかるんだよ。私が見破ってやる。何が魔女だ、ベアトリーチェだ。化けの皮を剥いでやる。
Jessica never stopped moving. Gordon and Cannon chased after her, doing their best to convince her to stop, but Jessica never lent them an ear. Eventually, the witch's VIP room came into view. This VIP room was always sealed and never used. No matter what kind of guest came, Kinzo wouldn't let them in there. And yet the servants were always made to clean this room so that it could be used at any time. So that the servants had started calling this room the Witch's VIP room after their second shapeless master. Jessica knew about this too, and she couldn't forgive the arrogance of the one who called herself a witch by staying in that room. The Golden Witch was just a fairy tale. Come on, a witch? To Jessica, she was nothing more than less than the murderer who had brutally killed her parents. Question her, hear her pitiful excuses, make her splutter in pain, gasp in anguish. No matter how hard she pretends to be a witch, I'll teach her that she's just a stinking, sweaty human. As Jessica yelled with all of her strength, she hit the door to the VIP room. It definitely wasn't a knock. That sound was the beating of her anger's hammer, as if she was determined to break the door down if it wasn't opened.
Akeroyo! Beatrice! Dite koi! Kikoeteru ndaro! Koko o akero!
There was no answer. Jessica grabbed the doorknob without any reservation, but she felt the resistance of the lock. She turned round to look at the two servants and spoke.
ここマスターキーで開くでしょ。
You shouldn't do that.
開けて。
お嬢様、それは大変な失礼に当たります。
Although Goda was flustered, he still tried to somehow calm Jessica's anger. After hanging his head silently for a while, Cannon pulled a master key from his jacket pocket.
カノンさん、いいんですか？
もしおられたなら、無礼になるのは承知です。それに、もしベアトリーチェ様が何の関係もないというなら、それを僕たちに釈明して納得させればいい。そうだぜ、その通りだ。借りるぜ。
Jessica snatched the master key from Cannon's hand and violently shoved it into the keyhole. Immediately there was a small sound and she felt the lock click. Then, without asking permission, she flung the door open.
Beatrice! どこだ？出てこい!
Jessica rudely stepped into the room. The witch wasn't anywhere to be seen.
くそったれ！いねえぜ！ どこ行きやがった。
お姿がありませんね。
Jessica, thinking she might be hiding somewhere inside the room, peeked behind the curtains and under the bed, but she couldn't find anyone. However, there were definitely signs that that bed had been used. Though it was only a vague sense, the atmosphere in the room felt a little soft. It wasn't the hard atmosphere of a place normally devoid of people like the chapel. You could definitely tell that someone had spent the night in this room. But she could not be seen. In reality, neither Jessica nor Goda had met Beatrice. They had only been told by those that had met her that she looked like double of a character in the portrait. So they were doubtful about what her face really looked like. However, Canon alone had met her. He understood what kind of being that witch was, what kind of personality she had. So he knew that forcing their way in here, in search for her, definitely wouldn't work out. She must be watching us bitterly flail about in vain from somewhere sneering at us. She's that kind of person. Because he was looking at things that way, Canon was the first to find it. The other two were concentrating on finding the shadow of a person so they didn't notice. Near a water jug on the side table there was a single sheet of letter paper. On it was a short message and nearby a fountain pen which had probably been used to write it. Canon had already come to understand the witch. After finding the corpses, they'd been overcome by rage and barged in here only to find no one, so of course the witch would mock them. You can't mock someone unless they know they're being mocked. So in other words, that's what this must be.
お嬢様、ここに何か書かれています。書かれてるってなんだ?
Jessica dashed over and violently snatched a piece of paper away. She probably wasn't trying to be violent. She just couldn't control her strength right now.
だと、なめやがって!
As soon as she read that message, Jessica went into a wild rage, crumpled the paper up and threw it. Then she grabbed the light stand by the bedside and violently swung it around, mercilessly hitting the walls and furniture with it. The light bulbs all shattered at once and the fragments were scattered across the room.
お嬢様、気をお沈めください。お怪我をなさいます。
離せよ！ちくしょう、ちくしょう！出てきやがれ、ベアトリーチェ！よくも父さんと母さんを！そんなに私が怖えかよ！殺してやる！殺してやる！ぶっ殺してやるから姿を現しやがれ！だから離せって言ってんだろ！くそー
This was written on the paper.
私がぬくぬくとここであなたが飛び込んでくるのを待ちぼうけるとでも知的な夜に粗暴なるあなたは似合わない。こんな間抜けに育てた親はどんな顔？見たよ。本当にそっくりな間抜け面。今はお菓子の国でお腹いっぱい。
Man, that's just dark. It was the sort of thing that witch would write. It meant she'd predicted that one of the children who'd lost their parents would come running in here. If she's hiding somewhere in this room, she must be rolling around laughing now. The witch was that kind of person. She sneered at people's misfortune, using it to stave off the boredom of 1,000 years.
これはお渡しください。お怪我をなさいますと申し上げております。
Poor Goda. Wait, why am I saying poor Goda? What an asshole. Fuck this man.
離せって言ってんだよ！くそー！くそー！
Goda snatched away the light stand Jessica had been holding. After all, if she kept swinging it around, she might end up smashing it against something which would cause serious injury. To Golda's eyes, Jessica probably looked mad with rage, burning herself up with the flames of anger. But Cannon's eyes saw it differently. Those eyes were probably tears of sadness, hidden by rage. So, when the light stand was taken from Jessica, when she started crying on the floor, scratching at the carpet, almost as though she were grovelling, Golda was surprised, but Cannon was not. Of course, she had lost her means of crying by lashing out in rage. Considering that she was the daughter of the Ushiromiya head family, she was in a very shabby state. She scratched at the carpet with her fingernails, and even her feet were scratching. Jessica cried very, very hard. Because if she didn't, her rage would start building up again and swallow her up. But over and over again she remembered that humiliating message. I can only imagine what the parents who raised you to be such a moron must have looked like. Alright, I saw them, and they look just as moronic as you. Now their bellies are full in the land of sweets. As Jessica cried and screamed, she triggered an asthma attack. The servants watching over her hurriedly ran up to her and rubbed her back, but that only provoked Jessica's wrath. Jessica got up unsteadily, and as her asthma continued, she went out into the hallway.
お嬢様、お薬を至急。南條先生をお呼びします。
郷田さん、僕に任せてくれませんか?
Hannon had noticed. Gorda, who was vastly separated from her in age, probably couldn't sense the tears in Jessica's heart. Hannon, who had noticed, had to be the one to support her.
カノンさん、いいのですか?
今のお嬢様には涙を流す時間も必要なのだと思います。ご両親のあんな死に方を目の当たりにしては。
そうですね。
Gorda also understood, and he knew that Jessica and Cannon shared a vague relationship with each other. So he understood everything and left it to Cannon.
わかりました。私はローザ様のところへ戻ります。お嬢様をくれぐれもよろしくお願いしますよ。
はい、お任せを。
Cannon's voice was frail, but he nodded firmly. After looking at his eyes, Gorda nodded firmly as well. Gorda was a veteran, with many years behind him. He'd seen a great number of people in his life, so he knew the rigorous sparkle that could be found in the eyes of those who possessed self-control. He had surely seen that in Cannon's eyes, so he would leave this to Cannon. When you think about it, maybe this was the first time that Gorda had ever trusted Cannon and relied on him for a job. Oh, jeez. Jessica, still suffering from her asthma, seemed to be heading towards her room, though she kept leaning against the wall. Cannon followed her wordlessly. If she had asked for a hand, he would have leapt forward and supported her. But until Jessica did ask for that, he chose to hide himself, watching over her from a distance where he could come to her rescue at any time. When people feel their hearts are about to explode from sadness and want to have someone by their side, you can bet 10 billion of them would want to turn around and find someone in the place that Cannon now stood. As he watched over Jessica from behind, then finally she doubled over in front of the door to her room. The asthma attack had stolen all her strength, and though her thoughts had gotten hazy from the lack of oxygen, making it impossible to even stand up again, but right then, Jessica didn't think she wanted someone to lend a hand. She still hadn't been able to overcome the flames of anger. Even if someone had offered her a hand with good intentions, Jessica would have wanted to tear it off right then. She knew how unfair that would be, so she definitely wouldn't ask for help until she overcame the fiery anger burning inside. Jessica had probably lost the willpower to even call for help, but Cannon heard it. He definitely heard it. Cannon definitely heard that voiceless call for help, one shared by miserable grievers the world round. An endless scream that no one ever seems to hear. Cannon quietly knelt by Jessica's side and wordlessly offered her his shoulder. Though Jessica kept coughing painfully, she accepted it, unlocked the door to her room, and entered.
こちらへ。今、お薬をご用意します。
Jessica often said that when her asthma got serious enough, it hurt so bad that it felt like she'd vomit up her whole stomach. Her face was pale and her gaze wavered, and yet the coughing continued. Even so, her sadness was probably even stronger. After having her sit on the bed, Cannon took a fucking hell. Why is it they've used bigger words? They took an inhaler from the cute little basket on a nearby side table and handed it to her. Jessica sometimes forgot to take her medicine with her. Whenever this seemed to have happened, Cannon would take notice and secretly carry around the inhaler from the first aid kit in the servant room, but he hadn't done so today. He scolded himself as though wondering how he could call himself furniture after failing to bring it with him on a day like this. Then he remembered the day when he'd used that word and somehow betrayed Jessica's feelings. It jarred Cannon's heart, but he felt it would be indiscreet to think about something like that considering how Jessica felt right now. And he locked it up inside the depths of his heart. When she inhaled her medicine, Jessica's wild breathing calmed down a bit, and she was finally able to regain her composure. But she lost too much strength and willpower to get up from the bed. No, she just watched her parents get fucking murdered. Cannon, what do you think, you fucking pebble?
私は大丈夫だぜ。
No, you're not, Jessica. Fucking hell.
父さんと母さんはダメだけど、私はもうちょっとなきゃ大丈夫だぜ。
Cannon regretted his poor choice of words. Did he really say, "Are you alright?" to her? Was he really that clueless of the pain in her heart? This was what made him furniture. This was why he couldn't become human.
廊下におります。ご用がありましたら、すぐにお呼びください。
Cannon understood that she still needed some time to cry alone. He told her to call him at any time, bowed and tried to leave the room.
何か
Jessica had spoken up as though she wanted him to stop, so Cannon had stopped. If she asks it, I'll do anything I can to help her. Right now, I'd even become a cane or a chair if it would help ease the pain in her heart. If by doing that I could make up for the pain I dealt to her heart on that day. For a while, Jessica stared into Cannon's eyes. It was as though her reason for stopping him was something she couldn't put into words. For a while, neither spoke. Jessica broke that silence with a small voice.
ごめん、なんでもないぜ。しばらく一人になりたいって。ロザを
一人にはしません。あなたを僕は一人にしない。
Now look at that, he's growing a heart in there. A deep hollow chest of his.
だから廊下にいます。いつでも呼んでください。
For just an instant, it looked like some kind of hope had flitted into Jessica's eyes. But it was very faint, and it disappeared like the first snow on the surface of a river.
ありがとな。しばらくだけ。一人で。
はい、失礼します。
Cannon bowed once again and closed the door. He thought those words of his would give her some courage, but now it felt as though they'd actually hurt her for some reason. Why? He didn't know. Surely that was because he was furniture. That was why he couldn't grasp human sadness even now. As Cannon repeatedly questioned himself, he walked down the corridor. He felt like the window at the corridor's end was coolly calling to him.
僕はやっぱり家具でしかないのか。
It was still pouring outside, a dark grey world. Even on days like this, Shannon would surely see the ocean and know that it was blue. But to my eyes, even if it cleared up, I would only see grey. Until I can understand the blue of the ocean, I'll be nothing but furniture imitating a person.
本当に女心のわからぬやつよ。ああいう時は黙ってそばにいるのが正解だ。だからゆえに貴様は家具なのよ。貴様。
There shouldn't have been any trace of human life in this corridor. It hadn't. It had been an empty corridor filled with frigid air. But those scoffing words approached Cannon from behind. When he turned around, he saw that witch. That witch who hadn't shown herself when Jessica had searched for her, with a rage bordering on madness, and who had left that sneering letter to toy with Jessica.
女の傷つけ方は3つある。特別にわらわが教えてやろう。一つは刃物で傷つける。一つは心で傷つける。そして最後が一番難しく、一番効果的に傷つけられる。なのに意識せずして傷つけられる。わかるか？わかるわけもないし、知りたくもない。期待を裏切る。だ。女ほど夢見がちな生き物はいない。勝手に夢を見、勝手に傷つく。お前のような距離の男が一番女を傷つける。わかるまいな、貴様には。どれほどジェシカを傷つけてきたか、全く考えが及んでいまい。家具だから。お前のたわごとに付き合う気は毛頭ない。僕を嘲笑うためだけに姿を現したというのか。うぬぼれるな家具。貴様ごとき嘲笑うにも足りぬわ。しかしそなたも一人ではそれに値しなくても、二人揃えば十分に足りる。若々しき男女の悲運を笑う喜びは何度繰り返しても飽きぬのでな。なんだと。まさか貴様、お嬢様を。第二の番の生贄に寄り添う二人が必要なのでな。お前たち二人は実に都合がよい。
待て、勘違いするな。僕はお嬢様とそういう関係じゃない。第二の番の生贄にはならない。
だからお前はジェシカを傷つける。だからお前は人間になれぬ。ならばよいだろう。貴様がジェシカを思い人と認めぬならば、それを受け入れてもよい。だがジェシカは殺す。
なぜ？
このバカが決まっておろうが。殺したらそなたが歪めるだろう。その表情が楽しいからの他に何の理由が必要なのか。儀式に従い、わらわは気まぐれに13人を生贄とする。だがそれ以上殺してはならないとの決まりはない。わらわが楽しければ幾人でも殺す。だから殺す。わらわを思いっきり笑わせてみせろよ。カグカノン。
At that time, Cannon definitely heard Jessica scream. What is this music? I forgot this song was in the soundtrack. When he blinked and looked down the corridor, the witch who'd supposedly been there so nonchalantly just a second ago was gone. At that moment, he was just standing there, all alone in the corridor doing nothing. And the person he wanted to protect was asking for help from far away in that direction. It was obvious what he should do. It wasn't logical. It was an electric reflex. Without a trace of hesitation or distraction, there was a person he wanted to protect and she was asking for help. And at that moment, he genuinely wanted the person by her side to be him. When he flew into Jessica's room, the scene that greeted his eyes was a bizarre one. The room had become a fantastical world where a blizzard of gold-coloured specks danced, almost as though gold leaves had been scattered inside a snow globe. No, that's not it. I've seen this spectacle before. This isn't gold leaves. It's countless golden butterflies, Beatrice's minions. Jessica was surrounded by countless butterflies, waving her hands around, trying frantically to drive them away.
お嬢様。カノン君。助けて。
Well, I mean, Beatrice doesn't kill her, the asthma might. Cannon rushed towards Jessica and violently brushed the cloud of butterflies away. The butterflies, which were sickening despite their beauty, surrounded Jessica's face, trying to crawl in through her mouth and nose. Jessica choked violently, almost as though the butterflies were triggering an asthma attack, mocking her. But when Cannon ran towards her, the butterflies stopped attacking and began to dance an elegant rondo around the pair.
カノン君。カノン君。大丈夫。僕の目の黒いうちはあなたに誰の指一本触れさせたりするも。出てこい、ベアトリーチェ。これで満足か。
As he stood guard in front of Jessica, who was using her inhaler and seemed to be in pain, Cannon yelled into the empty air. And when he did, the empty air did indeed laugh back, satisfied. And when he did, the empty... Oh, and then she showed herself. It wasn't in response to Cannon's demand. It was obviously because appearing and sneering would bring them even more humiliation, and plus, it was more fun.
これで全ては筋書き通りよ。今やそなたは草上の恋よな。いや、二人が揃ったのだからカモとネギと呼ぶべきか。
トリーチェ。
お下がりください。お嬢様、僕が守る。姫に騎士が揃わば魔女が現れるのは必然よ。どれ、金蔵の家具がどの程度の力を持つか見せてもらおうではないか。
She snapped her fingers with a piercing sound. When she did, a blizzard of gold butterflies was stirred up, and they began to form a small mountain as they whirled around in a circle. It was just like the swelling of a cold, wintry wind that builds up a mountain of leaves. From that mound of gold, the hand sprouted and appeared as though a resident of the world below was crawling up from beneath the ground.
なんだよこれ。
Jessica couldn't comprehend what she was seeing right now, and her mouth kept flapping open and closed. It was the bite of wisdom seen in those trying to understand something incomprehensible. That thing crawling up was probably an attendant who served the witch. It appeared to be wearing a uniform suitable for one who served, but its face was wrong. It looked strange. It was covered with pitch black hair, breathed rotten breath, and its eyes were filled with the same strange subterranean glow as lava. And to symbolize its non-human status, it had 2 horns. It was the figure of a goat-faced attendant who served the witch. By now, Jessica had no idea what she should say. All this happening in front of her couldn't be explained with common sense, and she couldn't do anything except open and close her mouth. Jessica hadn't realised. She hadn't realised that this island had already been cut off from the rules of our world. But there were some things that even she could understand. This goat attendant served the witch, and he was after her life. And apparently the witch had already given it the order. She was looking at Cannon with an expectant gaze. She looked at him with an expectant and therefore challenging gaze, as though asking him how he intended to protect this maiden. Though the attendant had looked especially bestial while crawling to its feet, you could see in the way it carried itself that it possessed more than enough grace to be worthy of serving the Golden Witch. And you could tell that it was overflowing with the joy of furniture, wanting to meet its master's expectations.
見せてもらおうではないか、金蔵の家具の力を。今度は間違えるな。家具であることを忘れるな。この後に及んで人間のふりを続けるのなら、死ぬのはお前だけでは済まぬぞ。
The goat attendant made what seemed to be a silent, respectful bow. Was it directed at its master, or was it offered to Cannon, its opponent? Then on the attendant's hand, a blade of wicked malice appeared.
なんだよそれ。
Jessica had been unable to understand what was happening before her eyes for a while now. All she understood was that this glow in front of her existed for the purpose of ending her life. And right now, that was enough. Cannon spoke quietly at Jessica, who was hiding behind his back.
お嬢様、壁に下がっていてください。背中は決して壁から離さないように。姫君はおとなしく騎士殿の背中に隠れているがいい。自らの命を男に守らせる醍醐味でも存分に味わえばよい。
Have we come to calling Cannon a man now? Is that where we're at in the story? Okay.
さあ、カノン、お前の刃を見せてみよ。
Come on. There we go.
美しい。金蔵は家具を生み出すことに関してだけはわらわの足元に及ぶやもしれぬ。こんなもの
バラの手入れにも使えなく。カノン君、それは見せたくなかった。
よくぞ抜いたぞ。思いを寄せる女の前で己が人間以下の存在であることを晒した気分はどんなものよ。
黙れ。
憤怒で己を焦がしているくせに冷静を装うか。なるほど。真に熱き炎は青く静かだという。今のそなたがそうだというのか。
僕の力でお前を殺すことなどできるわけもない。お前は月、石つぶてを投げたとて月を砕くことなどできるわけもない。だがお前は権限するために水面にその姿を映す。水面に石つぶてを投じれば一時月を乱すこともできるかもしれない。しかし月を砕くことなど至らない。だから僕はこの命尽きるまでお前の映る水面を叩き続けてやる。
気に入ったぞカノン。始めろカグども。ほう、美しい奇跡だ。
The witch's words of admiration broke the silence, and for just an instant they broke Jessica's paralysis.
私は夢を見てるの？
You wished.
来い、魔女の家具め。元来た地獄へ叩き落としてやる。
A strand of red had been left on Cannon's cheek. The witch saw this and grinned broadly.
勘が戻らぬことを言い訳につぶやいてもよいぞ。
カノン君、しっかり。大丈夫、僕はまだ死なない。
The curve drawn by the goat attendant's blade drew a large arc in an empty space. Cannon wasn't there. He was behind it.
先に帰りて、主の帰りを待つがいい。行け。
If this battle of drawing sparkling curves was chess, then Cannon coming from behind was check. And press, press, and press, and press. Use 7 moves and make it mate. Perhaps the goat attendant hadn't even been granted the ability to go into death rounds. As its knees buckled and it fell over, it broke into a bunch of gold butterflies with a pop. So there was no sound of it hitting the ground. Even those unable to understand this battle would surely realise that Cannon had been magnificent.
ハンドメイドには勝てぬか。そこまで見下げたものではないらしい。
次はお前だ。 ベアトリーチェ
The instant Cannon's blade sliced diagonally through the witch's form like a knife through butter, she turned to gold and burst. She scattered into several thousand gold butterflies, and for just an instant the room was filled with the colour of twilight. It was just as Cannon himself had said. Slicing Beatrice was just the same as slicing the surface of the water where the moon was reflected. The witch's form, with an ordinary expression on its face, as though she'd been there the whole time, was right behind Cannon.
十分に面白い見せ物であったぞ。それに免じ見逃してやろうかと思ったが、今の無礼で気が変わった。
嘘をつくな。お前にお嬢様を殺させはしない。たとえそれが無理でも僕より先に殺させはしない。
I'm fine, she'll kill you first then.
お前にはそれすらできぬわ。喋るな家具が、無口であれ家具が、身の程を知れ家具が。
カノン君は家具なんかじゃない。
ほう、なぜそう言えるのか。
理由なんかいらない。カノン君はカノン君だよ。うん、本当の名前は別にあるけれど、それでも名前は家具じゃない。カノン君にはカノン君の生き方がある。それはとても高潔なもので、自らが決めるもの。家具だから意見しちゃいけないとか、家具だから自分の人生を持っちゃいけないとか、そんなのないよ。お嬢様、あいつを挑発してはいけません。うん、はっきり言っておくぜ。カノン君は家具じゃない。人間だよ。どうして？カノン君は自分の意志で私を助けに駆けつけてくれた。そして恐ろしい魔女であるあんたの前に立ちはだかってくれた。私を見捨てることなんていくらでもできただろうに、そうしなかった。自己犠牲は人間だけが持つ高潔な精神だ。だからカノン君は人間なんだ。だから訂正しろ。カノン君を家具だなんて呼ぶな、二度と。お嬢様。
語るな人間が。とっとと終わらせよう。何しろまだまだ第二の番。互いの尊厳を認め合う寄り添いし二人を今こそ生贄に捧げよ。さあさあおいでなさい。罪を許しなさい。煉獄の七杭が一つ。色欲。
The witch summoned her furniture with a mixture of laughter and anger on her face.
色欲のアスモデウス、
Ah, it's Asmodeus. Hello.
ここに。
茶番は飽きた。第二の番を速やかに遂行せよ。わらわに瞬きを三つも許すな。
仰せのままに。
また妙なのが出やがったぜ。
It took Cannon less than an instant to understand. That goat fist from a second ago had been nothing more than a pawn to the witch. However, this newly summoned furniture was a game piece with a vastly different value.
素敵な獲物に恵まれるなんて、なんて幸運なのかしら。怯えてる？かわいい。
来い。魔女の家具、お前には殺されない。
私の姿を追うこともできないのろまのくせに生きがって行くわよ。ねえねえ、どこがいい？どこを貫いてほしい？お答えなさいよ、かわいい子。あなたの好きなところを思い切り貫いてあげる。さあさあ、お答えなさいよ、かわいい子。
僕を可愛いと言うな。
Oh, that's so funny. I don't know, just I get a certain kick from Canon being called cute. It's just really fucking funny.
行くわよノルマ。さあ追ってごらん、その節穴で。
Was it Canon? Was it Jessica?
お嬢様。
Uh-oh. I think it might have been Jessica.
目では追えなかったけどよ、読みは当てたぜ。さあまあ見やがれ。
Cannon's back had been the target, but Jessica had predicted it. She'd predicted that the witch's target would be the complete opposite of fair and honest, his back. But she had no way to block it. She hadn't planned on it being some act of self-sacrifice. She just couldn't think of any other way to protect Cannon's back. So she could do nothing but block it with her own back. The furniture of the witch, who had changed its form into a demon's stake, was buried deep into Jessica's back. It was an obviously fatal wound that reached as far as her lungs. When she saw this, the witch let out a loud, evil laugh. Because it had hit where the witch had predicted. Everything was as the witch had predicted.
どうしたカノン。ジェシカお嬢様はお前より先には殺されなかったんじゃないのか。そうそう、それそれ、その顔よ。お前のその顔が見たかった。楽しんだ、実に十分。もうよい、死ね死ね、笑わせろ。さあさあおいでなさい、罪を許しなさい。煉獄の七杭が一つ、フンド。
フンドのサタン、ここに。
Satan, or as the Japanese pronounce it, Satan.
その獲物はお前のものだ。今すぐ食らってこやつの舞台に幕を下ろしてやれ。人ならば交番とも言おうが、家具のお前の場合は大道具係が舞台裏に運び出すといったところか。
僕はもう家具じゃない。そしてそれを二度と疑わない。
なーに？あんたまた私に殺されちゃうの？あんたの胸温かくて本当に貫くと気持ちがいいのよ。
She's implying that she's the one who killed him last time.
さあ、また味合わせて。
Sorry, last time I mean Act 1.
あなたの温かい胸の中で熱い熱い血潮で私を思い。
I wonder if the casting call for this was like, I just want to hear your evil laugh. Because that's what you're going to be known for. There was no way to block it. The sound of a woodpecker filled the entire room. And before he could blink, it was already right in the centre of his chest. When you take a piece in the chest, the rules say that it's impossible for your opponent's piece to defend itself. So this was an obvious result in accordance with the rules. Cannon landed on his knees, and he apologised. Not to the witch, but not to my lady. He apologised to Jessica.
ごめん、守りきれなかった。キスかっこよかったよ。
Cannon finally fell over. He landed next to Jessica and the two lay there, like the constellation Gemini.
カノン君はさ、もう家具じゃないよ。はい、それに気づくのが遅すぎた。君の本当の名前聞きたかった。僕の本当の名前は
In his last moments, Canon wanted to tell her his real name, but Jessica had already fallen into a sleep from which she would never wake. So Canon's real name, which he had protected until today, in the end, he couldn't tell it to Jessica.
僕は人間にな
Those were the last words Canon left behind.
笑わせるな家具が。100年を経ようと家具は家具よ。捨てるときに家具のために墓穴を掘るバカがどこにいる？家具は叩き割って薪にして、後には灰しか残らぬわ。そういうことよ。家具に刻める墓碑などない。貴様は死ねばこれ以上の屈辱を受けることがないと信じてるようだが、それは甘いぞ。死者を恥ずかしめるというのがどういうものか。
Taking a puff from her pipe, the witch breathed the smoke at Canon's corpse. When she did, Canon's corpse softly floated up into the air and disappeared as though it had been eaten by a mouth in empty space. The witch played dirty until the very end. The corpse of the pair who managed to understand each other in the end were not even permitted to be close. If someone had been watching, they probably would say mournfully, "So this is what you meant by disgracing the dead." However, Beatrice was far crueler than that. The reason for that would soon become apparent. Right, I'm leaving this one here, but I'm recording another one back to back, so I'll be back in like 2 seconds.